Everybody, my name is Rob Saik, and according to my Swiss partner, Patrick Walter, who is very much on the second with meetings and stuff like that, it's time to get started. And in my mind, this will be one of the most important webinars when it comes to the foundation of your farming operation, which is your farm wealth, and more importantly, your farm family. So I've got lots of stories to share with you today as I bring on our panelists, but we've got Dean Klippenstine. Dean is with MNP, and you see his credentials in the invitation. Elaine Froese is one of the best family farm coaches that I know of in North America, runs a team of 7 coaches working with farm families, a great keynote speaker. And somebody you probably don't know is Derryn Shrosbree, and Derryn runs a company called 33/7 that, you know, if we think about the why we should be doing things, Derryn really works on the how and the structural side of preserving your farm wealth. And you're going to hear that, and I'm going to give you a concrete example about that. I just came back from Havre, Montana from 406 Agronomy, and I was asked to give a talk there. It was called Managing Your Business in Turbulent Times. And when I think about the dangers facing farm businesses, farmers will say, well, it's the markets or it's weather, it's input prices and stuff like that. It's not. The real big 3 dangers in farming is 3 Ds. It's divorce, and it's disability or disease, and it's death. And so I have kind of lived all of those things in my career, and life isn't easy. We go through a lot of ups and downs. I was starting AgriTrend. I was maybe 39 or 40 years old. I can't exactly remember the age I was at, but I got a call from my dad, and my dad called me to the Beverly Crest Hotel, and Dad sits me down, and we never talked that well. And this is Elaine, I'm going to bring this up to you, but we never, like, Dad just never communicated. He's one of those guys that just, you know, like that. And he sits me down. He says, I'm getting out of farming and you're taking over. And that was the conversation. And there was no structure. The debt load was heavy. At the end, the auction sale really didn't bring back much. I was left with a binder, a ring binder, and seriously about that thick of issues. Later on, Dad was rear-ended on the highway, ended up being a paraplegic in the hospital, and we had to have power of attorney and take it all over. And it was hard. And, not a successful ending to a full farming career. So Elaine, I'm gonna start off with you, and then I'll go to Dean and Derryn. And the question I want you guys to start off with is not so much to introduce yourself and stuff. Everybody knows your credentials, but what are the biggest mistakes that you see farm families making as they start to talk about this really prickly issue of succession, transition, and even estate planning?
So I think the biggest mistake, Rob, is their mindset. They think conflict is bad, and so they avoid conflict like the plague. And I often say the 2 biggest things killing ag in 2022 are procrastination, putting things off because of the fear and the anxiety and the overwhelm, and then the conflict avoidance. And so for your dad, he wanted you to have the farm. He just didn't know how to go about it, and he wasn't a talker. And it's assumptions. And so I talk about my 3 C's, which I think will be helpful to the people listening. Everybody in agriculture needs clarity of expectations. The second thing they need is certainty of agreements and timelines. By when, Rob, will you take over the farm? And what will those written agreements look like? And then the third thing is what we're doing here today. We're not here just to talk. We're here to get people to act, and talk does not cook rice. So I don't know how many succession planning seminars you've been to lately. Why haven't you done anything?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think you said this, the whole idea of getting this process, it's not Roundup. It's not like you spray it on and see the results right away. It's a lengthy process. And Dean, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see farm families making?
Well, I'd echo the exact thoughts of Elaine. Procrastination, people not and they don't know where to turn, and they don't communicate well as a rule of thumb. And I'd actually include a bunch of my folks at M&P in that same category. We all think business and numbers, but we need people like Elaine and her team to create the catalyst to get the discussion going. We have lots of business solutions, but business solutions come after the discussion and the framework and the family and the communication. So I'd absolutely think procrastination is the number one, because these aren't simple, easy issues. We go through an M&P, I'll talk to our own, we start thinking about our succession partners shortly after you make partner, right? It's a constant evolution of new people coming in and people exiting. And Elaine's bang on when she talked about conflict is not our enemy. There's okay to have different ideas and discussions. So don't lead with the business solution. And you know what, Rob, I'm as guilty of that as anybody. Because I'm an accountant and I'm a business guy and I'm a math guy, I just want to give the solution, and we don't spend enough time on the communication piece.
Yeah, this is why I've got the three of you on here, because it really is all about these areas that have to be brought forward. Again, I go back to my own farming situation. I started farming, I was 14 years old. I took out a loan, and I had, when I was 21, I took on 3/4 of land at, I don't know, 18-20% interest rates, and the prices were high. But we never talked about anything. It was just like, I wanted to bring a computer on the farm. There's a great chapter in my book about my dad thinking about what he thought about the computer that I brought on the farm and stuff like that. Derryn, you've been, you work with wealthy families, and you help put in place, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, structure to help make wealth management work, or to put the facilities in place. What is it that in the families that you've worked with, and you've worked with lots of high net worth families, and there's lots of farm families today that are high net worth families, what is it that you see as some of the dangers or the biggest mistakes people are making?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I just want to echo what Dean and Elaine said. It's the West was won through horses and cattle, but it'll be lost through death and taxes. Right? And the last thing you want to sit down on a Sunday supper is to sit and talk about death and taxes. It's not the most conversation, and yet it's the most pertinent. I don't think Dean and I can do our job unless the conversation has A, started, or B, is at a certain level where, Elaine has gone through the process and identified what's going on, what the mindset is, what the macro factors are. Farm children versus non-farm children. Where are we sort of in that generational wealth transfer? Like, how many generations are on the farm? Is there 3 generations, 2, 1, et cetera, et cetera? How do we structure that? And then working as a team, or having a team of professional services like Elaine and Dean and myself, whatever the case may be, to really dive deeply into what is the plan. And we need to be very, very cognizant of what the plan is for the future, because there's not a cookie cutter solution for everyone. And yes, I've done extensive work with many farm families from coast to coast, and they're all different, right? It's the tools are the same. Like, everyone has a hammer and a chisel and whatever the case may be, but different strokes for different folks. So I think the conversation is extraordinarily important, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week at Power Farm, and to continue those conversations.
Yeah, he mentioned Power Farm Group. I've been running a peer group for power farmers. 20 farms have been running this for 10 years now, and we get quite naked. In other words, we share financial information, and we get into the sticky issues that really need to be addressed. One of them being a death binder. So we've had lots of conversations around building a death binder. If something, and one of our power farmers suffered a tragic death last year, 53 years old, bang. A tragic accident, died. His son, 25, all of a sudden had to take over a farming operation and a big business and all kinds of staff. Where do you start? What are the passwords to the computers? Where is the safety deposit box? Where are the contracts? Who do you talk to find out where the grain contracts are? Like, these kind of things. And it's a big deal. And Elaine, last week, one of the things that we discussed at Strategic Coach is longevity of life. And so when you think about longevity of life, we are living longer. And one of the things I heard last week was if you sit down with and you separate them. So you separate the sons and daughters from the moms and the dads, and you ask the moms and the dads, how long do you want to stay active in the farming operation and what age? And then you ask the kids, what age do you think mom and dad should stay active? And you bring them together to look at those numbers. They can be vastly different. One of the farms that I talked to said, these guys are both in their 30s and 40s, and they said, we want dad to be involved, but he needs to start thinking about a different kind of a role. Can you comment on those conversations that you have?
So the best phrase I have with that is I have MAP 4 for my training as a Hudson Institute coach, Rob. And I just showed the slide again on a different webinar this morning. In your 20s, it's about independence. In your 30s, it's about mastering success. In your 40s, it's about taking power and control of your destiny. Uh-oh, you're 40, dad is 62, and who's still hanging on to all the reins? And in that example that you gave, that's the issue, because if that son had been farming with his 53-year-old father, he should have had some of those things already in place, right? Yeah. I'm 66. My husband, Wes, who's 65. Wes is in the sweet spot of stepping back without stepping away. And that's a phrase from Dick Whitman from Whitman Consulting, who I respect highly and who you know. Yep. And Dick was grooming his successor, who is his daughter, of his 22,000 acre farm and mountaintop experience. But nobody wanted the logging. So Dick is still in charge of the logging. He's still on the advisory board. All of this to say is, Rob, what you've just said is pay attention to how old you are, but then have the conversation. Because my insight comes out today because it's Thursday, and it's going to be lessons from divorce. And the average age of divorce in Canada right now is 46. The length of marriage, this is going to shock you, is 30 to 32 years. Women want a different life. I've given you my best 40 or 45 years on this farm. I want something different. The spouse is maybe saying, hey, Rob, I'm going out here with boots first. I'm not going anywhere. So in transition planning, which is what we're talking about today, if the spouses do not agree and they're butting heads, you're at risk of divorce, and you're also at risk of being very stuck. Yeah. So pay attention to how old you are and ask people. Here's my coaching question. As you age in place on this farm, mom and dad, what does a good day look to you? And for me, I have my grandchildren right across the shelter belt, 159 steps from my backyard. I'm happy to live here, hopefully healthily, for the next 20, 25 years and just play with my grandkids.
Well, that's a noble place to be right now. That's really good. Dean, one of the things that that impresses upon me as I talk to audiences around the world is people talk about sustainable companies and sustainability and stuff like this. And if you had a company that was 150 years old, you would define that. You think about, P&H, Parrish and Heimbracher, think about Patterson Grain, think about Richardson's. Those companies are successful, right? They've been around hundreds of years, many generations. Many farms have been around many generations, and it's really incumbent upon the leaders of the farms to make sure that, as you say, those partners can exit gracefully and the new ones can come in. What are some of the key first steps that you see, Dean, from your standpoint, that could lead that discussion forward?
Well, one of the things I always want to make sure that none of this transition will be successful without a sustainably operating profitable farm business. And people forget that. And it's actually harder with the massive accumulation of wealth that's occurred in the farms in the last 20 years. It's harder for kids to become good and focused on profitability when there's ridiculous excess wealth sitting in our operations. And so to quote a buddy of mine who is quite a unique character in business, he goes, always bet on management over old money, but both is better. And so the ultimate success in my mind is when you get well-established, successful farm operations who, to Elaine's point, recognize where they are in the age cycle. Because I knew everyone else was getting older. I didn't realize it was happening to me too. But if you do that and instill the confidence and ability of your children to operate the farm profitably, that's powerful. And again, without that, no amount of wealth can be sustained with an unsuccessfully operating the operational farm. And so I hate to be the accountant on the panel, but the farm profitability is really, really important, and nothing can happen without that, Rob.
If there's any questions that you have or comments, please put them in the chat for all of the attendees. So this is striking home pretty close, Dean. When one of the 3 Ds happens, divorce or disability or death, you have to have some people around you to keep it going. So very personal. We lost our youngest daughter, Laura, on the 16th of October. She's gone. And there is nothing that will drop you to your knees more than that phone call. And I'm running a business. I'm running AGvisorPRO. So how the hell do I keep moving the business forward when your world is shattered? And the answer to that is a team. And Patrick Walter and Brock Moyer and all of the others on the AGvisorPRO team kept this thing moving forward. And if it's all on your shoulders, I'm going to go back to you, Elaine, for a second. If it's all on your shoulders, and one of these things happen, it sends the farm into such a tailspin so fast it's not even funny. Comments, Elaine?
So we have to recognize your deep loss, Rob, and what you're having right now is what I call a grief spasm. Happened with our farm when my sister Grace was killed by a drunk driver driving from my farm to the home farm when she was 23. My mother was never the same, became ill with asthma and died 6 weeks after we had our farm family transition meeting with Myers Norris Penny Dean and Allison Kennedy in the Winnipeg office. And so again, because of your trauma of losing Laura and because of my trauma of losing Grace, I've always operated with the mindset someday is not a day on my calendar, because we just don't know. And so we don't take that as a heaviness. We take that as an opportunity to, what do I need to put in place to manage making that next step forward? And you mentioned the death binder. I just want you to change the name of that to the life binder, because Myers Norris Penny actually has a whole life binder thing now that I'm starting to fill out about what the value of our land was when Wes and I bought it back in the day of 1981 and those high interest rates. And then also getting really clear on what you own and where it's at. And that exercise helps you start talking about, do you have power of attorney? So my husband was in a truck accident watching soybeans, and I was in trauma care, and Ian, our son, had the power of attorney already there. And so I just really, and in my own world too, I walk and talk about succession all the time. And the journey with Ian is the unfolding of more and more documentation to give more and more certainty and more clarity. And I also work with the team. I can't do all the things that I do. And you work with strategic coach, Rob. So we talk about your buffer days, your focus days. I don't work on Fridays if I can help it. And except tomorrow I'm going to have coffee with Patrick. So that'll be great. And on Sundays, we take the day off, because again, the other thing I think that we're not talking about, and you mentioned how that grief of losing your daughter took you to your knees, is how are you going to sustain being healthy again to manage that loss and that grief? And farmers will tell me, Elaine, I can't stop crying. And I said, but he said, nobody died. I said, of course not, but you sold your cows and you loved your cows.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I think, Rob, that's underneath what 33.7 is doing as well, is accountants and lawyers will say, let's just keep the emotions out of it. And I'm going, are you ever off base, Charlie? Because we're all making emotional decisions all the time. And we need to understand what money means to you. We need to understand that, like Rob, you got your dad still talking in your voice, even though your dad is gone. And you still have Laura's, like you still have your kids' voices. Like, and so pay attention to the story you're telling yourself, and don't do it alone. And when I speak,
I've already reached out and had 4 or 5 sessions with somebody who I'm
Good.
talking through, because this is not easy. And then talking with people like this is quite public, but at the same time, for me, it's therapeutic, because I do need to share with people the things that we're going through.
Well, and I'd like to just chime in on some stuff Elaine talked about there, Rob, if I could. And that's now asking an insurance guy if I should buy an insurance policy is kind of like asking my car salesman if I should buy a new truck. The answer is always yes. But the unpredictable and the liquidity pressure and the operational pressure of an untimely event, which they're all untimely, is important. And that's where Derryn and his team, people think insurance is a cost. It's a protection mechanism, so that it allows those events to become a little more manageable or a little less unmanageable in crisis times.
Yeah, I'm going to share another example from my personal life. So I built AgriTrend over the period of, I think, 17 years, made a decision to exit, and we sold AgriTrend to Trimble, and it was a good exit. They treated us fairly. It was lucrative enough. And I had a 3-year earnout, and I found myself with quite a bit of capital. So I got some good advice from lawyers and accountants and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I want us to talk about, Dean, down the line is estate protection, which is really not succession, it's now estate protection. And I got some advice to buy $2 million worth of permanent life insurance. So I have to make these premium payments for about 11 years to get this permanent life insurance policy in position. The checks are $100,000 a year. So for the first couple of years, I stroked these checks, and it's kind of okay. And then I start building AGvisorPRO, and I'm going, holy shit, I kind of need the cash. And the only people really benefiting from this are my kids. And geez, I kind of need the cash. So I got this $2 million permanent life insurance policy in position. And then you mentioned, Elaine, through Strategic Coach, it was Dan Sullivan who introduced me to Derryn and Martin, and they said, do you know about this process? And so the way this thing works is you set up a special purpose vehicle that owns the life insurance policy. So in my case, my holding company, Saik Management Group, pays the insurance company, Canada Life. Gracie Point, now this is key, sees that I've made my premium payments, and they lend the money back to me in my back pocket. I put the money back into the company as a shareholder's loan. How does Gracie Point end up getting paid back? Well, I die. When I die, they have the guarantee of my death against a life insurance loan that they've given me. When I die, their loan is paid off, and the rest of the money sits there for my family to use in estate planning. Now, the beautiful side to this is when you consider a farming operation, I'll give you a concrete example. Dad and mom are 63, 64 years old. There's a 27-year-old son farming. There's 2 non-farming kids. They're trying to grow the operation. They need about a $3-4 million worth of life insurance to take care of the non-farming kids. The premium is $250,000 a year. How the hell do you cash flow this? So the way this works, the farm liquidity process, is the farm pays the premium goes back to mom and dad. They lend it back into the company as a shareholder's loan. They could pull on it later on tax-free. The expense is a tax expense for the farmer, as is the interest on the loan. When mom and dad die, the loan is paid off, and that takes care of the non-farming kids. Now, Derryn, over to you. See if I've got that right. But this is, in my mind, one of the most important processes that farm families should be paying attention to. So Derryn, over to you. Love the ball.
For sure. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, that's great. If you ever decide not to do farming and want to do the tax-free zone, you've got a spot in the team. So there we go. So just to add, so you have the 3 Ds. I think you could perhaps add one more D, and it would be dilution. So what is dilution? We are the solution to dilution. Dilution is, in your example, let's say it's 4 kids, 2 farm, 2 non-farm. How does a farm, which is asset rich but cash poor, pay out the 2 non-farm kids? Right? You would use a life insurance policy. So let's say, for example, it's $4 million life insurance policy. So each kid traditionally would get $1 million of the death benefit. What you could do is say, actually, the non-farm children get $2 million each, and the farm children get the farm. That way, you've done estate equalization upon your death. You haven't diluted the farm because you don't have to sell any acreage, right? The farm goes to the non-farm kids. The death benefit goes to the farm goes to the farm kids, and the non-farm kids get the death benefit. So that's just another way that is what we call the tax-free zone or intergenerational cascading wealth works. So depending on the need of the farmer, whether it's an estate issue, whether it's an estate tax issue, or whether it's estate equalization, this solution can work it can wear many different hats as you work through the solution. In your case, you needed money back. So what Rob was discussing was the opportunity cost of dollars. So in a farming operation, you have limited resources coming in. Say you make $1 million. You can take the $1 million and go buy more acreage, go buy grain silos, or whatever the case may be, or you can buy a life insurance policy, which takes care of the family and all that good stuff. So now you're in an either or situation. What is a farmer going to choose? More land, of course. More grain, more combines. Of course they are, right? Because the opportunity cost is like, well, I get the value, but I get it when I die or my family dies. So the priority goes super low. So they're not going to do it because the sticker, to your point, Rob, is super high.
Well, that's the point. When I started stroking these checks, I had, I had free cash. But as I started pouring money into AGvisorPRO, I had less cash. And all of a sudden, the priority of that life insurance policy is lower than the money coming in to fund AGvisorPRO.
Correct. So how do you do both? How do you not have any opportunity cost of dollars? Because you need the protection, you need the life insurance, you need the solution to dilution, because you're going to die and you're going to have an estate issue. You know that. But the priority, to your point, is low now because a section just came up and I want to go buy more acreage. Good price, right? So you're going to go buy the acreage. You're not going to do the life insurance, which you're just kicking the can down the road. All right. And ultimately, unfortunately, the Grim Reaper is going to come eventually, right? So, why don't you just do both? Because you don't have to choose anymore. You can have both. So very simply, your farm operation strokes a check. Let's just use 100,000 as an example. Strokes a check to an insurance company for $100,000, and you get $1 million policy. You then get a financing company, which is your second transaction, to finance you back the 100,000. So what is your opportunity cost? It's 0, right? 100 went out, 100 came back in. So you've now addressed your solution to dilution. You've addressed the estate issues. You've addressed the farm versus non-farm kids. And when you do die, it pays off your terminal tax bill. So that's all done. That goes into your life binder that M&P looks after. Happy days, right? Now you've got 100 grand back as a loan. So now you're going to go, okay, let's go buy the acreage. That's use case 1. Fantastic. Or you can use it personally for gas and groceries and pay no income tax on that 100,000. That's interesting too. So you've got multiple use cases for the loan coming back. You've got all of your estate needs taken care of, and you have no opportunity cost of dollars. For the first time, you don't have to choose between good stewardship and cascading intergenerational wealth or increasing your net worth. You do both at the same time with one solution.
So this is the interesting thing. So I have a concrete example because we put several of our power farms through this process now. So the life insurance policy, $250,000 a year. The farm pays that. Oh my God, how do you handle that? Well, the money goes back into mom and dad's hands. They've got to do a medical. So this is also one of the reasons you don't want to procrastinate, Elaine. You got to be healthy enough to qualify. But the money goes back into mom and dad's hands, and they can lend it back to the farm as a shareholder's loan. They can pull on that later on to subsidize their retirement. And in the meantime, and Dean, I want you to touch on this. In the meantime, the premium as well as the interest on the loan, because there is a nominal interest rate on the loan, that's a tax deductible expense for the Yeah.
let me jump in there, Rob. Sorry, you just misspoken one line. The
Oh.
premium is not tax deductible to the farm. The interest
okay.
expense is. Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
So please do not deduct the premium.
Oops.
Dean would
I
have.
may
an
have to go
absolute-
back to correct my CRA.
That's, yeah.
submission.
If you deduct the premium, Dean will have an epileptic fit. Yeah. Don't do that.
I think I'm cool. I think my guys covered me up. But Dean, over to you about the mechanism of how to do this. And the reason I'm bringing this up is this is so freaking important for you people.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm going to veer off a little different direction. I right now, with the profitability that there's been in the farms of recent, I think there is the liquidity for these estate equalization plans to occur even without the leverage, right? Leverage is there if it's available. All things being equal, my preference is it's a forced liquidation because of the estate equalization. And I know there's lots of people in my industry who do disagree with me. There's lots of people in M&P who disagree with me. But to me, fair is equal. And with the massive wealth appreciation that's occurred on the farms, the solution to dilution is really only available in an insurance policy or an uneven estate distribution of wealth. And so I'm always fair is equal, and Elaine may disagree with me, and that's okay. She's already said conflict's okay, but I like the idea of the liquidity being put into the forced savings account of an insurance policy. Again, I don't, leverage is not my first preference in those tools. It's available for sophisticated people who know what they're doing, but all things being equal, I'd rather that excess liquidity in the farm be stored in investments in insurance without the leverage component.
Elaine, over to you.
So I just have my little postcard here with me, Finding Fairness in Farm Transition, because I knew this would come up in the conversation. I don't totally disagree with what Dean's saying, but again, it comes down to money and expectations. So if you take my family as an example, Elaine and my brother next to me have always been wealthier, Dean, than my parents. And so we didn't expect liquidity from my parents' estate because we've had more wealth anyway. So there's always an assumption that every kid needs something, and that's a wrong assumption. So I find the more helpful question, what does every kid and every parent need to be successful going forward? And I don't know, Derryn, if you know the company called Define Success, but I think they have a similar tool to what you're doing. And the other accounting firms that I've worked with down in Southern Ontario are using this as a tool. And even Dean, as you mentioned, in your firm, people have different ways. So really it comes down to, what does the family feel good about? And what are the expectations that go with whatever tool you're going to put in place? And I think you have some more questions you should address in your chat box there, Rob, because I think some people have some other ideas.
Yeah,
Oh, sure.
yeah. Go ahead, Derryn.
Yes, just to address some good questions. So yes, I agree with you, Dean, and I agree with the people in the chat. Leverage is not, you don't have to use it. It's there if you need it, but it's not essential, right? And with a couple of good years in the ag business, there is excess liquidity on the farm, and that should certainly be used first. I'm just using it as an example to say, look, with leverage, you can adjust opportunity cost accordingly, right? It's not for everyone, and to echo your point, it is for the sophisticated farmer. It's not, this is not it's not a difficult solution to get into place, but you've got to monitor it, and you've got to be pretty judicious on where the funds go and what you do with it, right? We'll just leave it at that. And this is also, this is not one solution fits all. There are many different ways to estate equalize. Like, we know that. We're just using this as a specific example because, we have Dean from M&P and myself. But yeah, Elaine knows many different ways to equalize farms. As Dean says, equal is fair. But yeah, this is just a certain way to do it mathematically. And it's not the be all and end all, but it does increase farm wealth exponentially. It really puts a huge multiplier effect on the farm's wealth. And we have many different little bits and bobs we can share with you if you are interested.
Yeah, again, this isn't like a cookie cutter solution. And I think it's been brought up in the chat that, family trust play a role. And I've set up a family trust for my family. And certainly a lot of the later investments that I'm making are made out of the family trust for that very purpose. Again, getting back to the vehicle that I put in place for myself, which was the permanent life insurance policy. It's a tremendous vehicle. It's just that when you get back to opportunity cost, Derryn, I just felt that stroking the premiums off without getting them back in my hands was costing me money. And somebody in the chat said, well, land is increasing faster than the life insurance policy, which that's true. However, if you have the money back, you can buy the land too. So there's a lot of ways. And Dean, I'm going to turn it over to you for a second, just for a couple of thoughts around the trusts and there's lots of ways. We're just talking about some examples, mainly because of my experiences, but.
Well, fundamentally though, the trust doesn't change the asset mix of the farm and the family wealth. The trust is an excellent tax vehicle and we use them very well. The struggle comes is that if I have a client who has $9 million in farm assets and one farming child and 2 non-farming children, even though they're robustly liquid profitable farm, a significant portion of that $9 million equity stored in the farm is not available for cash distributions on the estate. And so that's where, and I've always been a fan of not settling, not saying we'll buy an insurance policy today to fix the value going to the non-farming children, because inflation has a way of making what looks like a perfectly reasonable number today look pretty goofy 25 years in the future. So we use it as a liquidity vehicle, but still tie the estate distribution to the value at the point in time of the actual passing.
Elaine.
Well, again, it's Peter Drucker said culture eats strategy for breakfast. So as a coach, the foundation I'm trying to get families to talk about is, what do they believe? What is their value system? And, my son came home to a beautiful, beautiful farm, and a very profitable one. And he doesn't want me to give him things. He wants to earn them in his own right. My daughter has a mental health disorder and cannot work. And so my kids are never going to be economically the same. But the culture is, are you happy? And as far as I know, there are no funeral cars pulling a U-Haul behind them, right? So you're not going to take it with you. So as a coach, I want farm families to look at having the life they've always wanted while everyone's alive. And the conflict, I don't know, I've been digging in, and it'll be coming out in January, the rules of estrangement. So do you want to be rich in relationship? Absolutely. And so the family discussion around that $9 million you're talking about, Dean, let that $9 million stay in that farm. And the other families will also be wealthy, but I just don't understand the equality consideration, because it doesn't matter. Everybody's doing well. Let's celebrate everyone doing well. And I know that I'm a bit of an outlier when I talk like this, but I've seen it in families that I was sitting with a dairy family where the liability was north of 9 million. And the young farmer was 35 years old. And he lives really in a territory that is, cheaper than being a dairy farmer in BC. But as his sisters are being paid out, they're in tears, because the culture of that family is, if the farm does well and you don't, the farm has got your back. So again, what we're missing in this conversation is, what is the attitude of the farming heir towards his siblings or her siblings? Because if the culture is the farm will always have your back no matter what happens, then the culture of the family is, we're going to be okay no matter what offside thing comes. And I put that out there because I'm so tired of getting phone calls of farm family estate litigation. And Curtis Onashenko, who's a really good litigation CAFA member in Saskatoon, it's the fastest growing practice in law. And that's why we're having this conversation today, because people have to stop fighting about money and create solutions where the family will still be rich in relationship. And that requires interesting conversations. So don't keep putting this off.
Yeah, I'd give any amount of cash to get my daughter back right now.
Exactly, Rob. Exactly. And you can't.
Yeah, Steve Jobs said you shouldn't, he said, don't train your kids to be rich, train them to be happy. And the other thing that I learned through Strategic Coach is to treat everybody fairly doesn't mean everybody is equal. It doesn't mean that everybody's, I think right now to one of the really successful farm families that we're working with, and dad and mom right now are, I don't know, probably 70, 72, health is good. But the next generation has taken over the management of the farm. Mom and dad are in Arizona right now. He drives a motorcycle. They look forward to getting to Arizona. And at the same time, it's a beautiful thing to watch, because the thing that the farming son values the most about dad is his wisdom. So it's shifted in terms of what's important. Is it important to grab a shovel and shovel out the corners of the bins? Is it important to do the welding? Is it important to be on everybody about the maintenance of the oil changes in the tractor? Or is dad and mom's wisdom important? And so again, this is kind of where we need to have these conversations. Back to you for a second, Elaine, on this.
Well, I just typed in the chat box, and one of my favorite financial podcasters, the personal speaker friend, is Bruce Sellery. He lives in Toronto now. He has a podcast, and his book is called Moolah La, Why Smart People Do Dumb Things with Their Money. And his question is, what does money mean to you? And that would be a great conversation to have with your family. The other one is Dr. Moira Summers, who's another personal friend of mine, who's a financial psychologist, Rob. So we actually hired her to work with our family because of the difference in net worth between our two kids. And so I've also been involved this week with the National Farmers Mental Health Alliance, who's got a new course on ag-informed therapy. And that's another thing that we haven't even talked about, is the mental health and wellness, and whether or not mom and dad are making rational decisions about their financial plans, and what we do when there is a mental illness that needs to be addressed before there can be security for the family. So there's many layers. And I just want to encourage all of our listeners this morning to ask. You're not alone. And there are people here to help give you the resources you need to make that next step forward.
Yeah, boy, those are wise words. I mean, I've been going to Strategic Coach I'll be going again in December here, every 90 days. And I think I just started my 29th or 30th year. That's a lot of trips, but to review your life and to have a safe place to talk through some of these things is really important. I wanted to just touch a little bit on peer groups, Dean. I said we're going to do that. I run the Power Farm group. I have 2 groups. I'm at capacity. I would love to do more. Montana needs them, but there are several people out there that are starting these farm groups. And I'm a pie maker. We need to have more pie. We need to have more of these groups. Your thoughts on these things, Dean?
Good. And Gord, you've put some excellent comments and echoed, mirrored my thoughts. So I just want to touch on those. I'm with you. If it were my farm, I would use some insurance, but I would equalize the estate using the land separate from the operations.
So a land co and an opco, if you could.
Yes. So that so absolutely. If you want to have a long-term lease agreement between the family land company, which is inherited by all the siblings, that lessens the liquidity pressure on equalization, and I'm a big fan and supporter of that. Yeah. But the other thing, and to touch on what Elaine talked about, that when I talk about equalizing, I'm also making sure we aggressively bring in the children who are contributing to the farm operation into a significant equity ownership and stake in the operation at a very early age.
Mhm.
Some would argue too early, but I make sure that they're properly rewarded for their contribution on the success of the farm as their life goes on, not working for inheritance. And so I wanted to clarify those 2 points before we talked about the peer group concept, Rob. Peer groups, you've been a pioneer in the ag world, Rob, on many fronts, on the agronomy front, on the peer group front. You've been a pioneer in ag, and thanks for that. You've done an excellent job. But realistically, our industry is embarrassingly far behind. If Elaine, Derryn, and I owned a McDonald's, we would go to McDonald's coaching clinics, and we'd sit down, and Elaine owns one in Florida, and Dean owns one in Winnipeg, and Derryn owns one in Nevada. We'd sit down and compare numbers and how many fries we could do, not to make each other feel bad that they weren't doing as good as the other, but to make them understand the art of the possible.
Yeah.
So to make all of us be better, because none of us are doing it perfectly. And the ag, we have not embraced that concept. It happens in Ford dealerships, it happens in oil change franchises, McDonald's, John Deere dealers sit in, have peer groups. And so we really need to capitalize that because there's always something, excuse me, we can learn from each other.
Bang on. Derryn, I'm going to circle back to you for a second, bring you back into the conversation. Again, lots of comments that, there are many ways to structure this, and we've explored this. I think the bottom line is opening up and exploring. Like for me personally, I didn't have land. I had sold a business. I had capital. And so permanent life insurance made a lot of sense for me. How, and you guys are all available on AGvisorPRO. That's why we organize this. Elaine just put a service offering on our virtual marketplace, and MNP and 33.7 is on AGvisorPRO. You can download the app for free. You can connect to these people and have private and confidential conversations with them on the app. Derryn, like just start. How, if somebody wanted to investigate like the farm liquidity solution or the cash freeze or tax-free zone with you, how would they do that?
There is.
How do they start?
Yeah, Dean, to your point, it's kind of strange because there's not that much out there, and the stuff that is out there is not particularly good or correct. The tax-free zone or the farm liquidity solution or cascading intergenerational wealth has been the domain of the high and ultra high net worth for the last 150 years. It is not commonplace. It is not on the internet very well. There are bits and bobs around, but there is no soup to nuts solution. It doesn't really exist. You can get disparate information from various different places. You can go to Sun Life and try and download their stuff. You can watch a video. There's a child with an umbrella. It's kind of, it's not that, it's just not that well telegraphed.
So I'm just going to interrupt for a second. I asked Derryn when I met him, why doesn't Western Canada know about this? Is this thing going to go away? And he says, shit, it's not going to go away. All the Liberals are using it with their families to plan wealth in Eastern Canada. It's been a well-known tool for a long time. It's just that we don't know about it in the West. I said, how come we don't know about it in the West? And he said, well, there's no families of wealth in the West, you know, boom.
I definitely didn't say that. But yeah, I'm just kidding. So it's, yeah, asymmetrical information has been a large part of this. It just hasn't filtered down, but it has been around for 150 years. And the solution was made up by, it was essentially invented by extremely wealthy families, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Mellons, all that kind of stuff. So they came up with a solution to become extraordinarily efficient because they had lots of children and they wanted their wealth to accumulate, not to be diluted. So if you have $100 million estate and you have 4 kids and you divide it $25 million equally, you know, your estate has now been decimated. So how do we take that estate and not make it 100 million divided by 4? How do we make it 100 million times 4, multiplied by 4? You use the children's lives to elevate the wealth of the family. And I know that sounds slightly macabre, but the more children you have, the wealthier you can get, right? They're expensive little buggers. So you may as well put them on payroll, right? So there we go. So we're being a bit glib. But yeah, it's not that easy to find the solutions out there. There's a bunch of folks similar to myself that do it, I think, hopefully a good job in preserving and maintaining and creating wealth for the families. But there's not a lot of us, right? So to your point, how do you find it? Well, email me or, email yourself, and Dean knows a bunch of stuff.
Find you on AGvisorPRO is the way you should answer that question.
My apologies, Rob. I'm on AGvisorPRO, otherwise I'm unavailable. So hit me up on AGvisorPRO and I'll help you out.
Right.
So there we go. And we're educators. So yes, we do sell the solution. I get it. Ultimately, I bought the solution for myself and my family, my wonderful wife and my 3 boys, because we wanted to not dilute ourselves. So, and we have a modest farm in Ontario. We have 103 acres. So just a little baby farm, and we just farm vegetables. So we're not really farmers. We kind of want to be farmers. Yay. But we instituted the solution for ourselves, and then we help other people do it. So ultimately, we're educators, and we'll educate you and give you everything for free. And you can just ask us a million questions, and you can do it with us if you want to do it with someone else. It doesn't really matter. But first and foremost, we would like to educate you as much as we can and use us as a free source of information for building your wealth and building your family's wealth.
Next week, Derryn and Martin from 33.7 will be in Saskatoon. If there's anybody going to the Ag Business Connection event in Saskatoon next week with the Flamin Group, we'll be there. Those guys will be there, and I'm running the Power Farm meetings for a couple of days there. We're winding down to 9 minutes. Dean, as we start to think about what to do next, I get this. I think, Grant, in the comments, you said this is complicated. Well, it kind of is. It's complicated. And it took me, and I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, I know that. It took me a while to figure out how this thing all works. But at the end of the day, you put the cash out, you pay the premium comes back into a pocket. The pocket goes back, the cash goes back into the farm. The net effect on the cash for the farm is virtually zero. There is an interest cost that's attached to the loan. That, as Derryn adequately pointed out, is a taxable expense. So this thing can work. It's complicated. It's not that hard to get going, but you need to set it all up. So Dean, over to you on some closing thoughts, and Derryn, and then I'm going to let Elaine wind this up.
Well, thanks, Rob. There is a lot of issues. I guess from my M&P perspective, none of this matters if we're not profitable in our operations, and so we can't forget to do a great job of the day-to-day execution of the farm and training the next generation, who often are better at creating farm profitability because they don't have the luxury of a mountain of wealth. They have to create theirs. They haven't rode, some of the younger generation coming in hasn't had the luxury of land appreciation and really good times. And so don't underestimate your kids' ability to be creative and drive profitable businesses with under your tutelage.
Yeah, I'm talking to a young man right now who's trying to leverage the assets of the farming operation in Saskatchewan to move into a value-added business. He said, most of what I need is here. I just got to figure out what the market is. And so I've been kind of coaching him on maybe creating an ancillary business right off of the farming operation. Derryn, thoughts to you on how or what people can do? I mean, there's so many things that can be done. This one, and well, maybe comment on how you've been able to do this with a number of farm families already. How has it gone?
Right. Yeah, thanks, Rob. So we've had a large amount of success in the Power Farm group. And there is a particular family which we've done a 3-generational cascade. So we did a mom and a dad. So their mom and dad, and then 3 children, and all the children, where there was 2 farm children and 1 non-farm child. It was extraordinarily successful, but it did take a year. Like, it took a year to set up. They all had to go through medicals. They had to go through financial underwriting. To your point earlier, it's not complicated, but it is detail orientated. So, once you get interest and fit and you understand what the solution can bring to your family, we do all the numbers. And then it's a lot of, step-by-step, methodical, almost farming work as we set up the solution. It's not complex, but it is methodical. Just to reiterate, we'll help you through every step of the way. And also, there's two words that, if I can leave you with this, it's clarity and control. So we provide you with clarity, and we give you and your family control over your destiny and control over the deeds. So divorce, disability, death, and the fourth one is dilution. So clarity and control. We don't ask you to give us money and then we'll give it back to you, blah, blah. It's all done in your name, in your corp, in your farm, in your trust, whatever the case may be. So clarity and control, and we educate you along the way. And it's pretty soft and gentle. I do have lots and lots of case studies that with people that you actually guarantee you know the names, that I can offline give you those people's names with their permission, and you can chat to them. You know, just call them up and be like, hey, how did this work out, and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of the way we've done it in the past. Hope that helps.
Yeah. And I know I'm not supposed to do this, and Patrick is going to give me big shit over what I'm about to do. But Derryn, if you want to put your email into the chat, people can grab it. Dean, Elaine.
I'll do it now.
No,
So,
you got to get
Elaine-
me through AGvisorPRO.
Yeah, get through AGvisorPRO. That's really what we want you to do, is get through AGvisorPRO. Elaine, you and I have been pounding the roads forever. I love this industry. I love what we do. I, at this point in my life, speak pretty bluntly because I have enough experience and I've seen enough pain in my life to know that people don't need, well, I mean, the pain comes, you're not in control of the pain, but you are control of how you deal with it and who you're surrounded with and how you can cope with it. And so that's what I'm learning right now. Again.
Yeah. So Dr. Nikki Girard, who was a psychologist in Saskatoon, Rob, had a study many years ago, 12 years of study of farm families in Saskatchewan. And when I wrote my first book way back in 2006, Planting the Seed of Hope, she said, strong families communicate, strong families celebrate, and strong families stay connected to community. And I think in agriculture, we need to pay attention to what's keeping us strong. And Derryn was mentioning clarity and control, and I speak the same language. Brene Brown will tell you that being clear is kind. And you may have messages to deliver to your loved ones that are hard to deliver, but once they land, then they can be processed and then people can make choices. And I can choose to respond to all kinds of different people's asks. And I say, I wish I could give you that, but based on the profitability and viability of the farm right now, that's not reasonable. And I have farm families who are very shocked that they aren't in a good financial situation. And my question to them is, how did you let that happen? Because actually, Dean, they're blaming their accountant for not contributing to CPP. And I went, but were you not paying attention? And so that's where the Ukrainian comes out in you, Rob, and the Irish comes out in me. But someone was asking in the chat, how do we reach out? And Patrick wants you to download the AGvisorPRO app. All kinds of thousands, over 600 farmers are on there and can ask questions. There's all kinds of experts. And again, my cell phone is always available for people to text me and reach out, because I don't do this work for the money. I don't need to work. I do this work because this is what I'm wired for, and this is what I'm called to, and this is what fills my cup. So thank you for the opportunity today. And
It's been a really good session. And really the reason I'm building AGvisorPRO, the reason our team is building AGvisorPRO, is we want to create a brand new way for agriculture to connect. And to be fair to Elaine, texting her at 3 o'clock on a Sunday, that really doesn't work for her. So we're creating an asynchronous communication platform for agriculture. You got a question about sheep on AGvisorPRO, we'll find an answer for you. You got a question about a monitor that's frozen and won't work properly in your tractor combine, we'll find an answer for you. So AGvisorPRO is an agnostic and unbiased platform. All of these companies and their people are available on AGvisorPRO. Elaine just put a brand new service offering on AGvisorPRO. This is what we're building. And so I encourage you guys to download it and to try it. You can search me on there, search my name, Saik, and hit me in the chat. Same thing with Elaine. That's how we connect on the platform. And with respect to Derryn and the 33.7 guys, give them a hit. and let them start walking you through. I think the brilliance of their program is to take advantage and to really give you the confidence, knowing that if something catastrophic happens in the next little while, there's a mechanism in place there to take care of it. That gives me personally a tremendous amount of confidence. And Dean, you guys have got so many experts in that MNP world. I think the step is start talking to somebody. Don't be afraid to pay them a little bit for the knowledge and wisdom. It takes you years to accumulate it. So I want to thank everybody for coming. This has been a wonderful webinar, and it'll be available online for people to download. Thanks, Derryn. Thanks, Elaine. Have a good coffee tomorrow. Thanks, Dean, buddy. I'll see you next week in Saskatoon.
And
Sounds good.
remember,
Thanks, Rob.
Christmas
next
is
week.
coming.
Christmas
Okay,
is coming. Yep.
Christmas
See you
is
guys.
coming.
Merry Christmas.
Great to see you, Rob.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Elaine. Bye-bye.